Hello. I've been wanting to record this video for some time now. In fact, I've had so many bashes at it that it should be a lot more polished than it's probably going to be. What I want to do is just introduce restorative yoga to anyone who's unfamiliar with it or it's been a while since you've done it. To chat a little bit about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And then also to just demonstrate some ways in which you can make props out of household objects, things that you'll find at home. Because the downside with this particular practice is that it does use a lot of stuff. When I'm teaching in a class, I'll have bolsters, blocks, blankets, eye bags, eye pillows. But these are all things that with a little bit of ingenuity and resourcefulness you can create or make for yourself at home. So the basic idea behind restorative yoga is that we're supporting the body in a series, or and by series I mean maybe 1, 2, 3 poses, short series of poses. And in order to make ourselves as comfortable as possible, so that we can stay for as long as possible, for an extended time in these poses and really drop into a very deep, relaxed state. Now, for those of you familiar with meditation or who have a meditation practice, this is not meditation. There is no requirement to stay present, to start examining what arises as you practice. We're not trying to unpick anything or, resolve anything within us. That might happen. That may happen, and that's not a bad thing. It's not wrong. There's no wrong way of doing this. But the idea is that you just support yourself to be comfortable, and then you rest. And it's different from sleep. You might fall asleep whilst you're doing that if you're tired. And if you do fall asleep as you're doing these practices, it's a good sign that you probably need to get a bit more sleep at night. So just take yourself off to bed half an hour earlier. The brain, as it's going into the deep relaxation, it can kind of go either way, sleep or really deep relaxation, and it's this way that we want to go, into relaxation. So essentially, when we're relaxing, we are counteracting the effects of stress on the body. Now, you cannot be stressed and relaxed at the same time. It's impossible. And at the moment, we are in a stressful time. Hopefully everyone has their health at the moment, but for some people, that has been and is an ongoing issue. There may be fear around your loved ones and the well-being of loved ones. You might be missing people, You might have financial difficulties, or there may be other struggles going on. It doesn't have to be the virus in particular that's causing issues in your life. There is so much stuff coming to bear as we're all sort of in this new and uncharted territory, trying to find our way through it, but with a great deal of uncertainty around us. And just being in or with uncertainty is stressful. It's not how we've lived our lives. Of me, for the last 45 years, this is not how I've been. Everything's always been kind of do this, and there we go. And I'm still in the same routines that I've been in for years. But suddenly, there's something, there's the thing that's held it all together isn't quite there anymore. I don't want to go into lots of chat about that really, but just to acknowledge that right now it's quite likely that somewhere or other in your life there is some stress. And what would be really helpful is a practice that would help to lessen the burden on the stress. And in particular, when we're talking about stress, stress is a good thing. The stress response is a good thing. I don't want to label it as bad or unnecessary. If there are times in our lives when we want to be able to act quickly and suddenly and to be alert. If your son or daughter runs out in the road, you want to be able to just grab them and pull them back. You don't want to have to, la 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 la, be really relaxed about it. There are times when we need that adrenaline or that push to get us through things. And so it is necessary, but so is climbing down from that and coming back down from that stressed out state. When stress becomes a problem is when it becomes chronic as opposed to acute. So those bursts of stress and coming back down, that's fine, that's great, that's functioning healthily, that's a nervous system that's functioning really well. When we're up all the time in this sort of heightened stress state, then the body isn't able to easily come back down into the relaxed state. And if we're talking about it in terms of the nervous system, we're talking about a sustained sympathetic response. Now, that brings blood to the skeletal muscles, it shuts down all the slower functions of the body, gets the heart beating, gets your breath coming in deep breath so that everything's getting oxygenated, you're on high alert, your senses are heightened, so you're seeing more, you're hearing more acutely. That's okay for a little while, it's not okay over a length of time. So when we come into the parasympathetic state, and this is the state that we want to drop into, we can think of it as a rest and digest state. So the digestion, the processes of elimination and digestion, our hormone production, all of these things are more nourished and more nurtured. Let's see, your immunity. That's a big one. If you're stressed, your immunity isn't functioning at its best. When you can drop back into these relaxed states, that's when you've got heightened immunity. I'm just going to quickly take a glance at my notes to see if I'm missing anything. Sorry, probably should have read this before. I know. Yes. So it's these slower processes of the body that we're wanting to stimulate: growth, hormone production, reproductive systems sort of working well. And for that we need to take time to relax. Watching the telly isn't going to do it for you. If you can kind of slop down on the TV or just stop, that's great. You relax your body, but the mind is still in a state of alert, or, if you're watching really poor quality telly, then actually your brainwaves are similar to those of someone in a coma, which isn't ideal either. We want the brain to just be able to drop into, it's almost a state, the word in yoga we use is a shunya, and it's a state that you can't really, I'm just going to turn the page to another, but you can't really directly translate. It's sort of possibly a state of samadhi, so a state of being in kind of bliss. It's not asleep and not dreaming. It's sort of this liminal state between consciousness and unconsciousness. So there's no sense of yourself, there's no I, there's no one experiencing the experience, there is just the experience. And when there's sort of, it's almost like contentless. So when people talk to me in classes, you know, well, I don't know where I've been for the last 15 minutes, you know, that's a shunya. When, you know, I didn't even know what was happening. That's a shunya. And a lot of times people say, I think I fell asleep. But actually, you know, the bell rings and you're up, you're awake. And you're in quite a nice blissed out state. And yeah. So before we get to that state, and that won't happen every time, that's kind of the sort of peak experience, if you like. But before we get to that, we have the physiological relaxation, and do not underestimate the power of just letting the body relax physiologically. This will take about 15 minutes. So when we're going into these poses, there are a few that for one reason or another you might not do quite so long. For 15 minutes you want to lay down, be still, be quiet, be in the dark if possible. And I'll talk about how we can do that for ourselves without having to do it at night or turn all the lights off. And yeah, it's that time that we're taking just to go from being on alert to being relaxed. And then after that, we go into that state of, you know, Shavasana, Pratyahara. So Pratyahara is withdrawal of the senses from their sense objects. So you might hear a noise outside, but it doesn't bother you. You know, the neighbour's children playing, or, you know, someone mowing their lawn outside, or, you know, the same with anything else. You know, the stuff you might feel a breeze, or you might feel something tickle you. I don't know. You know, it's so you're so within that nothing's really taking you out of that state. You're aware of it, but it doesn't disturb the internal state of relaxation. For most of us, in most of our practice, that's where we'll get, and that's a really lovely state. And then the optimum is going into that state of a shunya. So when you kind of hear the bell and yeah, you're like, oh, where have I been? And you kind of, you know, you've been in a shunya probably. So let's get on to talking about props. The most obvious prop that we have in yoga is a yoga mat. I'm sitting on one. It's not really necessary. The benefits of a yoga mat are that it's a non-slip surface. If you're on a wooden floor or a tiled floor, then I would suggest popping a blanket or a towel down for yourself, just because that will give you a little bit of insulation. So when you're practicing restorative yoga, as you go into these relaxed states, one of the things that will happen physiologically is that the body temperature will start to drop. And so it's a good idea to wear layers, wear a couple of tops, pop socks on, especially if you tend to suffer from cold feet. Anyone with Raynaud's or, you know, particularly cold fingers, you can pop gloves on. You know, make sure that you're going to be warm. If your hands and feet are cold, what it's telling your nervous system is that there is a chance you might be too cold. You're at risk of hypothermia. It's a bit extreme, but you know, you're not going to be able to drop into that very deep state of relaxation if you're a bit cold. So be warm. So yoga mat, number one. If you have one, great. If not, don't worry. The other things that I might use. So when we're doing classes, I use cork blocks. I like them because they're a bit more environmentally friendly than foam blocks. They're pretty strong and sturdy, and they're light for carrying around. So, but these are kind of like, yeah, they're not something that everyone's going to have. If you've got anything similar, I mean, the closest thing really would be a piece of wood or a real brick. You don't really want to be bringing those into practice. If you're feeling up for it, you could cut yourself some wood. Yeah, I realise what I'm saying here. But but they're not necessary. We can adapt other stuff for these. Mostly I use cork blocks to support bolsters. For the most part, we'll probably be using books to support bolsters or other household furniture, like a chair or a sofa or the edge of a bed. So, these aren't, it's not something to worry about terribly, but if you have them, they're handy. Oh yeah, this, incidentally, this is a golf ball. If you can lay your hands on a golf ball, this is nothing to do with restorative yoga. It has everything to do with keeping the muscles of your feet in good condition. This is really good just to have around, and how you would use it is just to stand on it and roll it underneath your feet. So Mum, I know you're going to be watching this, and my stepdad plays a lot of golf, so you're not going to be wanting for golf balls. They sort of have a habit of appearing. So if you don't have one to hand, just keep your eyes peeled. They turn up in the funniest of places. And yeah, it's just doing this, just rolling them under your feet. It's really nice. And you can apply more or less pressure, if there's anywhere that's feeling particularly ouchy, just work into that. Have a little look and a play around. It's just like a little mini workout for your feet. It's nice. So golf balls, great if you can have one. Nothing to do with restorative yoga. So the next thing that's handy to have are blocks, foam blocks. Some of you will have them. Most of you probably won't. Just get some books. Nice book on mushrooms here. I've got a whole host of yoga books that are great sizes. Bigger books are helpful in that you probably need less. You could also use, two stacks of paperbacks side by side. You want to make sure that they're pretty much the same height, but we're kind of improvising. So the main thing when you're using anything, and you might want to have a stack of books this high, stack of magazines, anything that's going to slip. What you can do is just use a belt. This is a yoga belt, but you could use a tie or a scarf or anything just to tie them around and secure them. That's going to stop your books from sliding when things go onto them. We'll cover this when we're doing setups, we'll cover things a bit more, but it's just so that you can start thinking about what you might have around the house that can be used in place of all the yoga stuff. Sometimes I use sandbags. These can be handy. What you might want to do is just put some rice or lentils into a pillowcase. I only use these rarely, so you don't need to go rush to the airing cupboard, grab a pillowcase and fill it with rice first, straight off. It's just another idea, an option. These are handy to have. Most people have cushions somewhere floating around. If you don't have cushions, use pillows. They can be really nice for supporting arms, for supporting hips. Blankets. Most of you all have blankets, but you can use a quilt, you can use a duvet, you can use towels in place of blankets. I'll fold them, roll them, squish them in to give support. They're nice and versatile, a blanket. In fact, if you've only got a big pile of blankets, you're doing pretty well. The main thing really that, there's two others. Before I get on to the bolsters, let's just do, with the darkness, with making everything nice and dark, what I usually use is an eye bag. Now this is just a bit of cotton sewn up, a long thin shape. It's long enough to reach down to the temples, and it's filled with about 3/4, 2/3 cup of linseeds. Linseeds are a nice weight. Lavender is also a nice weight for eye pillows. I have a cover. The cover is optional. You can also use, in place of a eye bag, you can also use a scarf. So what you can do as a scarf will also, if you tie it well, it'll bring a little bit of pressure to the eyes, which can be nice. And you could tie it around the head before you come into the pose. And you can just wrap it around your head, or you can tie it, if you're tying, tie to the side of the head, so that when you lay back, you've not got a knot at the back of the head. And what else? I'm trying to think what else I'm going to say about this. I can't remember. So you can use a scarf around the eyes. You can also use a face towel just folded over and placed on the eyes. A belt, if you've got a yoga belt. If you can, I have done this in the past where I've been a bit strapped for equipment. This one's a bit thin, but you can actually fold a yoga belt over a few times. Or a canvas belt if you have one, and just lay that across the eyes. That's also quite nice. Or a face cloth folded over and just across the eyes. So you're eliminating the light that's just getting into the eyes. And the body can relax a little bit more in darkness. The other thing that you could try, and I haven't tried this, it just occurred to me when I was doing sort of the first few versions of this video weeks ago, was that if you had a long sock knocking around, you could fill it with something, just tie one end and use that as a makeshift eye pillow. You could use rice, you could use linseeds, they give a really nice weight and a really nice feel. Just don't use anything that's going to be very fine, don't use sand, don't use anything that's likely to irritate the eyes or be small enough to come through the material of the socks. Similarly, sometimes, I know some of you in class really like these little bags. They're the same as the eye bags, they're just tiny little cotton bags of linseeds. And you can pop them in your hands as you're resting, and it just gives a really nice weight to the palms. Again, like an ankle sock with a half a cup of something in will be a really, really good substitute. So the other thing that I use a lot when I'm practicing restorative yoga is a bolster. It's probably the piece of equipment I use most, aside from blocks and blankets. So what I want to do is just show you some ways of making a bolster out of things you'd find at home. I'm going to use scarves because that's what I've got around, a fine collection of them. You could use belts, you could use string, you could use old ties, just the tie from a dressing gown, whatever you've got around. So the first thing that you can do is take a bath towel. So one of the really large bath towel, or a couple of smaller ones. And this one's quite wide, so what I'm going to do is fold it into thirds, I think. And the bolsters are about 60 centimetres long. So you want to be able to put the legs over the bolster comfortably, or support the length of the back comfortably. So that's why they're as long as they are. So I guess I've sort of folded the towel to about the length of a bolster. I've done that pretty well by sight. So yeah, about 60 centimetres. It doesn't have to be precise, but think about, supporting the spine, the base of the spine to the head, how long that needs to be. And that will obviously vary from person to person depending on your height. And what I've got here is just a pillow off of the bed. You can roll the pillow up quite tightly, pop that in the middle of your towel, and then roll it like a sausage roll all the way up. And then you can tie it at either end with a scarf. And you can use, if you want a thicker roll, this is quite a thin roll, you can use more towels, you can use blankets. What I'm doing here is just making sure that the knots at the back, where the ends meet, so that I've got a reasonably smooth front area. You don't want anything too bulgy, so nothing that's going to stick out too much. Chunky scarves might not be a good idea, but there is a makeshift bolster, so you can pop your legs over it, your knees, and support your knees. If you need to, you could lay back on that, and it supports the back really nicely actually, and just really opens up the back. So there's one version, and I think I'll keep that tied up for when we're doing demonstrations. The other thing you can use is a spare quilt, or a quilt. What I've got here is a summer quilt that's a double. You could use a single quilt. Just be wary of using anything that's too bulky, because you're going to make yourself too thick a bolster. It'll be thick, squishy, and so less supportive. What I'll do is just fold that roughly into thirds. And again, it's you want to get a width that's going to be able to support you. See, I said it should be more polished than it is. I've done this so much recently, and I tend to just use what I've got equipment-wise when I'm doing my own practice. So it's quite, it's still a bit new on me, on this improvisation. But here we go. So I folded a duvet lengthways into thirds, and then roll it up, and roll it up nice and tightly. So this will probably give you a bit more of a firmer base. Again, that's, and then I'm going to use another scarf here. You can use belts either end, that's fine. If you have got a scarf, one of the things that I've discovered is that if you tie the scarf in the middle, you can then stretch the scarf over a bit, so you stretch the ends over, like so. What that gives you is just a really neat looking bolster, and you can see comparatively there's not a great deal of difference in size. This one's a little bit squashier, it's going to not be quite so firm, but that's still going to give you a nice firm surface for laying down on and resting on. So I think that's going to be it for now. That's nearly half an hour of me talking about props and stuff. The next video I'm going to show you how to set yourself up into the first restorative pose. Thank you very much.